Senator Graham.
Do all of you believe if you had had somebody in your corner, someone assigned to kind of help you through the system, an advocate, that would have helped?
I initially went to the sexual assault response coordinator, and I found them to be very, very helpful and very supportive. But they have absolutely no authority with these issues. And while it was comforting in some respect to know that they were supportive and they were there, there's nothing that they can really do for you when you're going through the military judicial system. I think having someone who, because I eventually did a full investigation, and even then I had no one to guide me through that, to explain to me what was going on. Again, I didn't hear from CID for 4 months after my initial report, and so I think that having someone like a special victims individual who's trained in the legal aspects of what's happening and what's going on would have been extremely beneficial for me when I was going through the actual investigation process. Could you give the committee, not in public here, but privately, the name of the chaplain who told you that? I honestly don't remember his name, but I could easily find it out for you. Could you please find that out? I can do that for you. About opening to civilian litigation, is it Bugatti? How am I saying?
It's Bugwati.
Bugwati. Would you suggest that the claim be against the government or the individual member?
Well, as I understand it, the claims against the government are really the key piece here. It's claims against your employer. That Federal Tort Claims and Civil Rights Act cases have been traditionally brought up for the victim. So, I mean, all of this I think needs to be closely looked at. But in our system, in our culture, civil courts are where victims get justice much more frequently than in the criminal courts. And so we have to look at how we can make the military more on par with the civilian system. It makes no sense that young Americans should put on the uniform and then sacrifice their constitutional rights. It makes no sense.
Mr. Lewis, you received a general discharge, is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Again, maybe we can do this in the committee privately. Do you mind if we look at your file?
No problem, Senator.
Okay. From your point of view, do you think having a victim advocate would have been helpful if there's somebody that you could have went to that would have sort of been in your corner to kind of educate you to the things you could do when you hit a roadblock?
Some survivors have had success with a victim advocate, but I think that in order to be feasible, any person that would be in my corner would have to be of rank and able to issue orders and able to do things to help me directly. I was fortunate enough to see mental health, and I thought that doctor was in my corner, and he wasn't.
He was not?
No, sir. I cannot, I just cannot imagine a case where someone of lesser rank could effectively be in my corner while being subject to the chain of command.
Okay. Ms. McCoy, you were victimized multiple times, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Did you ever go through a CID process?
I did not. I did go through the process of filing paperwork and with another NCO. They helped me, come alongside of me. At that time, I don't know that there was necessarily a victim's advocate. I know that we had sexual harassment training, and we were already given, some steps to how to handle sexual harassment, but there was no one that could come alongside.
The one thing I want to make sure people understand, rape is not sexual harassment. It's a violent crime subject to severe punishment under this UCMJ.
Right.
So do you think a victim advocate may have been helpful to you?
I have to say, that the victim's advocate, if they have the proper rank, and if they're set aside and they supersede maybe the unit, and they have more authority and more power. Because if they just come along and they're just kind of supportive, I don't know how that's going to help that individual who's going through that day-to-day, maybe some backlash for even reporting it and the isolation. I don't know how that's going to help that individual while they're still stationed in that unit where they're receiving that type of treatment.
Maybe all of you could comment on this individually from your own personal experience. Why do you think the commanders, the senior NCO leadership, why were they so hostile to these claims?
In my own experience in the Marine Corps, there were signs of hope along the way. When I was at the School of Infantry, it was actually the infantrymen on the enlisted side that were just as outraged as the victims of sexual harassment and assault were. However, on the officer side, there was definitely a sense of an old boys club, colonels protecting lieutenants, colonels protecting staff sergeants. Whether or not that has to do with an inclination to protect one's own career, looking out for a future star, or whether or not there's some sort of misguided attempt to protect a good man because you know his family and he's served for 20 years. I mean, you hear this language all the time. And officers, there are fewer of us, and we spend time with one another, hanging out at the O Club. It is a completely different culture. That's why the Wilkerson case was even more egregious. I mean, you've got two pilots. There's this appearance of impropriety even without looking at the facts of the case. That's typical in every unit throughout the armed services.
One of the things that I really do stress is, it is about the leadership. The hostility isn't necessarily even towards women. The hostility is towards the feminine, the perception of being less than, and the perception of being weak. Even though I was the only female in my unit, I was not the only one that was targeted for abuse. We had 2 other males in my unit that were targeted regularly for sexual harassment and sexual abuse that were, that went through a lot of the same stuff that I did. It was not a gender issue. It was we are targeting what we see as less than, and just by me being a woman, I was automatically less than, even though I was just as good as they were. So the mindset, when you have that mentality, and then again you have the leadership that allows it to continue every day. I can't tell you a single day that I was in my unit that didn't go by without some type of rape joke, sex joke, sex play, simulated sex play between men. I mean, we had a sexual assault and harassment training that we went through, and one of our sergeants got up on the table and stripped completely naked and danced and laughed at it. I mean, that's the kind of culture that I lived in and on a daily basis. So when you deploy, you're stuck with these people in very small units in very small places. And why would I go to a chain of command that I knew was going to allow those things? So it's not just, it's not even a hostility towards women in general. That's the kind of culture that some of these units commanders allow to thrive. And when you have that type of culture, these issues are going to continue to be perpetuated.
This has been a Sunfish production.